Our fun-filled project for today, or this morning, is a vacuum pump from a 32 Cadillac. All it does is provide vacuum. Vacuum to the wipers maybe, or anything else that happens to run on vacuum. They couldn't fit a dual action fuel pump on this engine, so they made them separate. The fuel pump is a single action and the vacuum is operated by this pump. We're going to go through it and freshen it up. First thing I got to do is figure a way of mounting this or securing this so that I can work on the top of it. I can't clamp it by the ears like I do on a fuel pump, so I wouldn't be able to get to the bottom half. I think it's time to make something that this will bolt to. I'll see what I can come up with. Okay, I went through the scrap pile, and this was a plate that I used for mounting Stuart Warner pumps in. And I think, by the looks of it, it's going to work just fine. It holds it. Okay, with these, see this how this can go on any one of at least 10 different ways. You got to mark it somehow, so that the casting goes back on in the same orientation. And I just put a couple of dimples. That way I know it'll go back and mount on the car just the way the customer had it. You gotta remove these 4 screws. It's always amazed me how they put a filter screen on the vacuum side. It's filtering air. It's a gasket that goes around. You got to remove that, and remove these 10 screws, and this casting will pop up. You want to go easy with the last one, because there should be a fairly strong spring underneath here. And it should be strong enough to send this casting to the ceiling. Yeah, double spring. There's one, and there's one underneath here. Two springs. And the rest of this is empty. Here's where the plunger is underneath, and it pushes up on this diaphragm to operate it, to give you the vacuum. This little retainer and the ring to keep it from falling through into the engine. So just a few of the things that got to be cleaned up. And make sure there's no wear on anything. And there's the inlet and outlet valve. You take off these 4 screws in this retainer here. So be careful with these little screws. They're easy to get lost, easy to drop, and you know when you drop it, it's going to go to a place that's never been seen before, and it'll never be heard from again. Okay, underneath this plate there's a pair of valves. There's one there, there's a gasket. This holds the spring, which holds the valve down. Valve seat area. And there's the other valve seat. And that's all there is to taking it apart. We're going to run this through the bead blaster, get it all nice and clean. That'll be time to put it back together. And I might even be able to show you. Maybe. AC stamps a date down inside of here, but it doesn't look like they did it on this one. Nah. Okay, we're going to clean up all the oil off it and then run it through the glass beater. Clear coat it, flatten out the surfaces like this area, the valve seat area. This area here has to be flattened out. If you don't have a 4-inch belt sander, then next easiest step is to take a piece of sandpaper, like 220, lay it on a flat piece of glass, and just keep rubbing it circular back and forth till you get all these high spots off. I'll show you, before I finish it off, I'll show you, I'll touch it on there and you'll be able to see where all the high spots are and just how distorted the casting can get after 80 years. We'll be back. This is one of those times when we ask you to take apart some diaphragms. Obviously this one here, we need to reuse this and this plate right here. In fact, both of these plates too. But in order to get them out of there, we got to cut off these rivets. And it makes a mess of the plates, but it can be done. And then you reuse the plates and replace the diaphragm with new material. In the kit you'll get 4 rivets, the diaphragm, and what I do is I just take the Dremel and just cut away the parts that overhang the plate and then knock it through. It'll distort it a little bit, but you can fix it. This is definitely not one of my most favorite things to do. Once you get them apart, you get all the plates apart, flatten out all the dents that you made knocking out the rivets, and this piece that was sitting on the outside of it, inside of here, it's like looks like a leather bumper. It's what that pusher went up against. You're going to reuse this. Just clean it up, wipe any of the excess oils off it. If you want, you can turn it over so that it's got a nice flat spot instead of a dent like this. But it's not really that god-awful important. Anyway, these 3 pieces have to take a trip through the bead blaster, and then what we've got to do is, it's easier to use this piece, and line it up as best you can right in the center and pop 4 holes, and you can put the rivets in. And we'll show you that part when we get to it. And what we're going to do is we have to transfer these 4 holes to this. And what I do is I take the smallest end of it, center it, make a mark, and kind of look through. Get a pen, mark the location of these 4 little holes. Gasket punch. Yeah, it should line up like that. In the kit, you get 4 of these rivets. Which I should have checked before I did this. Okay, it looks like I'm going to have to open up these holes just a smidgen. With the exception of these. So let's grab a little tool and I'll open them up a little bit. Okay, now that the hole adjuster is done, we're going to insert 2 of these just to keep everything straight. We need 11 hands for this. Okay, we got 2 of them. We just got to support the bottom and give a whack to the top. And hope that it works. So far so good. Pop a couple more rivets through. Needs a little persuading, like so. Okay, it's held in there. Just got to flatten out the top of the rivet, or the bottom, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay. Nice and tight. Rivets are all in. Sitting. I wish they were a little tighter than that. Yeah, that's going anywhere. I flipped that piece over in the inside so it's got something nice to sit against. No more of a dent. And this part is ready. And that is probably the hardest part of this whole thing. Let's get some more stuff done. I wanted to show you just a touch. If you give an example, if you didn't flatten out these surfaces, you can see how it's just touching. Good spot in here. Nothing. That's on the base part of it. and the other half of it. If you were to put this in without resurfacing this and getting this nice and flat, you got a potential for an air leak right in through any of these spots. As it's going to squish down on the edges, and you'll end up with an air leak in between here. We're going to run them on the belt sander and get them nice and flat. This is the kind of finish that you want, all the way around. There's no spots. No place for an air leak on this. Time for some reassembly. Put it down inside, the spring on the outside of it. The diaphragm. And half of it is ready. We'll set that aside. Now we just got to run something. If you get a, it's probably a 3/8 wooden dowel. Stick a piece of sandpaper right on the very end of it and put it down inside here. Just run it back and forth a couple of times just to make sure that that's nice and flat. See how it's shiny all the way around? Do the same thing to this little small plate. You get a gasket for this. You get 2 new valves, 2 new springs. You get a new gasket and a new filter, and you can attach that too. Let's get the pieces for the internal part of this. Let's see if I can't move you in a little closer. Be able to see what's going on down here. We got a valve, and we got a bad valve. Wasn't quite cut right. As you can see, there's a little boo-boo. We'll file that right in there. Drop the new valve in. These little springs can play havoc. They're only about a 1/4 inch long, and a lot of times throwing them in the kit, you'll get 2 of them that are together. Just look real close. If you see you've only got one, look a little closer. There's probably another one stuck in there. And we got a little retainer. The other side is going to take a spring first. This is not a job for somebody with fat fingers. Set the valve on top. Try to get it as close to the center as you can. The plate. Make sure you can look through the holes. Just get it ready over there and push it down real quick. And you'll need something to line up the gasket, the screw holes again. And I put my screwdriver away. Here we go. try to get the opposite sides caught. Then you can move the gasket around. Man, oh man. Don't tighten them down till you get the gasket lined up. I guarantee you it'll move. Now that it's all tight, I'm going to put the screen on, the gasket, and the cover. Again, I don't know why we want to filter the air, but AC felt that it was necessary in this particular instance. One thing you want to watch for is, over the course of how many ever years this has been around, a lot of times you'll find these areas where these screws are, the steel is bent. Just turn it upside down, tap on it, and flatten it back out. You want to just tighten these to the point where you know it's not going to leak, and you're not distorting the cover at all. Now you should be able to suck air out and not blow air in. That'll tell you that this valve is sealed, the inlet valve, and this is the outlet, and I can't get a good seal on there just using, if you have a rubber plug with a hole in it, you can use that to test it, but that would just test this one valve here. And I think we need to. Oh, I had that backwards. This is the outlet. That's the inlet. And my inlets and outlets backwards. Okay, I gotta mount this thing, the body part, back in this little jig that I got, so that I can tighten everything up. Hang in there a second. Okay, we're all set to put this back together. Don't forget that big spring. And I didn't get the screws together yet. Let's just get a couple just to hold it down for this part. There's the index mark, and here's my index mark. Get 2 screws ready. Make sure you line up those 2. And get 2 of the screws caught. This can be a little challenging because you're pushing down the diaphragm and it's making the holes, the hole diameter smaller. A lot of the screws won't line up. So One way to overcome that is to push up on that bottom plunger. And that's a challenge in itself. Let's see if we can't figure out an easy way to take care of that. You want to be careful that when the diaphragm does do that, a lot of times, like right in here, what's happening is that the diaphragm's folded. It's folded up against itself because it's being pulled down inside so much. And of course, over on the other side here, the holes aren't lining up with the diaphragm. To the left. Let's see how many I can get caught. A lot of times as your screw is turning, it's sliding the diaphragm so the hole lines up. But it doesn't always happen. And if you push down on it, you'll push a hole right through the diaphragm in the wrong spot. Now, I'm going to try something. I take my gigantic pliers and see if I can't do it that way. Of course, a big C-clamp, if you had one that was big like that, let's see if I do. Well, would you look at that? You can't see it from there. Big C-clamp. Catched on both sides of that. Pulled it down and it flattened out the diaphragm, which is what you want. Flattened it out all around. What I gotta be careful of is, as I'm tightening this down, it takes the pressure off of this. But if you can get 4 of these screws tight, it'll hold the casting, it'll hold the diaphragm from slipping back in. There's probably a dozen other different ways, but that's what worked for me. Tighten all the screws down. And then take one last go around just to make sure you didn't miss one. And that's all she wrote. You want to test it? collapse that big piston. It'll tell you whether it works or not. Looks like we have a complete pump now. It's ready to, this one here along with the fuel pump we did earlier. And we've got the R32 Cadillac that's ready to be on the road again. I hope I didn't bore you. Click on like the video. Subscribe. Click on the little bell so you get notified if I do any other, not if, but when. And thanks for watching.